In the heart of the frozen frontier, where the wind speaks louder than any man, a reclusive woodsman lived alone in silence, by choice. His cabin stood miles from the nearest soul, and that's just how he liked it. But one evening, as snow began to fall, he found them, a woman with hollow eyes, and 3 shivering children by her side, lost, hungry, and too scared to speak. He didn't ask questions. He just opened his door. What he didn't know was that letting them in would change his life forever, because this wasn't just shelter for a night. This was the beginning of something he never saw coming, a family he never expected, and a love he thought he'd buried with his past was about to find him again. The mountains rose like frozen waves around him, ribs of old stone jutting through snow and pine. Elias Rourke moved through them like a ghost in buckskin, slow, silent, never hurried. His breath curled in front of his face, a thin white ribbon torn away by wind. The sled creaked behind him, with straining under burlap sacks and a side of deer meat already stiff with frost. His dog, a gray-bellied mutt with one ear torn, padded beside him, eyes wary and ears twitching toward every gust of wind that wasn't wind. The woodsman didn't talk much. Hadn't in years. Not since the war ended and the real fighting began. The kind that happened inside a man, long after the rifles cooled. Elias didn't plan to go through Red Butte that day, but the trail had iced over, and the creek's edge was thick with broken trees from last week's storm. He figured a quick pass through town wouldn't hurt. He needed coffee, maybe salt. Nothing else. Just supplies. Just in and out. But fate's a mean horse. It don't like to be steered. The town was a skeleton huddled in the valley, wood and smoke and rot. A few wagons sat crooked along the road, mules shifting nervously. Snow fell slow, thick. Elias passed a blacksmith, who gave him a wary nod. Past the saloon, where laughter turned to silence when they saw him. People didn't forget faces, not in small towns. They remembered what a man was during the war. They remembered who he stood with and who he left behind. He tied his sled outside the general store. The door creaked when he stepped in. Heat hit his face, fire and dust and old pine. The shopkeep, a wiry man with a wandering eye, didn't speak, just watched. Elias picked up what he needed. Nothing more. It wasn't until he stepped back outside that he saw them. A woman stood in the alley across the street, half-shadowed, 3 children huddled near her skirts. 2 boys, 1 girl. All thin, all silent. One boy's foot was wrapped in burlap, dark with blood. The girl, maybe 13, held her body like coiled wire, ready to spring. The woman had a shawl over her head, dark and threadbare. Her face was angled down, hidden, but her posture wasn't that of a beggar. It was tight, coiled, bracing. The church doors closed behind them. A tall man in preacher's black stepped back inside, locking the doors as if from wolves. The woman didn't knock again. She just stood there, froze in the cold. Elias watched. The street emptied. Townsfolk vanished like smoke. No one offered them shelter. No one met their eyes. Something in him twisted, deep, bone deep. He turned back to his sled, shoved the coffee and salt into his satchel, and crossed the road without thinking. The snow swallowed his footsteps as he approached. "Ma'am," he said, his voice hoarse with disuse. The word sounded like it belonged to someone else. The woman didn't move. "Need a ride?" he added. "I'm headed north." Still no answer. But the younger boy looked up at him with wide, wet eyes. He didn't look away. Elias waited. Wind tugged at her shawl. Finally, she lifted her head. Dark eyes. Tired, wary. A bruise fading along her cheekbone. Her lip cracked, but she didn't beg, didn't explain. Just met his gaze with something close to defiance. "My name's Meline," she said quietly. That was all. Elias didn't ask more. He turned and walked back toward the sled, expecting silence behind him. But then he heard the crunch of small boots on snow. They rode in silence, the children huddled under blankets. The girl, the oldest, sat nearest the edge of the sled, her hand never far from the inside of her boot. The younger boy coughed twice, hard. The second boy, maybe 10, stared out at the woods like he knew the names of the trees. Elias didn't ask where they came from. Didn't ask what chased them. Some stories bleed when poked. Best to let them come out in time. The sun sank low as they climbed the pass. Snow fell thicker. A coyote howled far off, lonesome and sharp. Elias's cabin appeared just before dark. Small, square, built like a fist against the cold. Smoke still whispered from the chimney. He brought them inside. The dog bristled when the girl crossed the threshold, but one soft command from Maylene stilled it. "Fire's hot," he muttered, removing his coat. "There's soup left. Might be thin." She nodded, ushering the children to the hearth. The oldest helped the younger two remove their boots. One boy whimpered when the burlap came loose. The foot beneath was red, swollen, 2 toes missing. Elias winced but said nothing. Instead, he opened a tin of lard and knelt beside the boy. Gently, he applied it, wrapped the foot in clean cloth. The boy watched him with open, quiet gratitude. Night settled. Elias gave him the main room, rolled out his own bed in the barn with the hounds and his rifle. Stars blinked down like watchful eyes through the gaps in the roof. Wind howled once through the trees, then hushed. Lying in the straw, Elias stared up at the rafters and wondered what he'd just let in. He didn't trust easily, didn't care to. The last time he opened his door, someone never came back. But something about that woman's eyes, like chipped obsidian, dark but full of storm, stayed with him. And the girl with the knife in her boot, and the boy who didn't cry, even when his foot was raw and broken. These weren't ordinary strangers. These were people hunted by something or someone and taught not to flinch when it found them. At the edge of sleep, he heard a noise outside the barn. Not an animal, a footstep. He sat up slowly, hand on the rifle. But it wasn't an attack. It was Ruthie, the eldest girl, standing under the moonlight in the snow, barefoot, holding something small, a carved figure, wood, shaped like a wolf. She sat near the barn door, then turned and disappeared back inside. Elias stared at the little wolf for a long time. Something passed between them, unspoken and strange. In the stillness, the land breathed deep, and for the first time in years, so did he. The days bled into each other like water through burlap, quiet, cold, and edged with something unnamed. Elias kept his routines. Before dawn, he'd split wood, check his snares, feed the dog. He didn't speak unless necessary, and the widow didn't fill silence with noise. Her children, though, were different kinds of stillness. Each carried silence in their own way, and Elias came to understand those silences were not the same. Ruthie, the eldest, moved like someone twice her age, deliberate, watchful, her shoulders always half-turned as if expecting to be chased. She never left her blade more than an arm's reach away. She asked no questions, offered no answers, but she listened like her life had once depended on it. Elias caught her watching him sometimes when she thought he wasn't looking, eyes dark as storm water, weighing him. The middle child, a boy around 10, named Luke, had a calm Elias didn't quite trust. He didn't flinch at blood or bone. When Elias cleaned rabbits, Luke leaned in close, watching the knife work with quiet fascination. "You always skin from the legs?" he asked once. Elias just nodded, and Luke nodded back, like he was tucking away a lesson he meant to remember. The youngest, Samuel, barely spoke. He limped on his wrapped foot, and when the pain got too bad, he'd crawl instead of cry. At night, he curled into Maylene's lap like a pup, small hands clenched in the folds of her skirt. He smiled once, and only once, when Elias showed him how to use ash and snow to numb the wound. Maylene took to the cabin like it was a place she'd lived before. She didn't ask where things were. She found them, clean without being told, cooked without praise. She never asked Elias for anything, not even space. When she spoke, it was with purpose. When she looked at him, it was never soft. She had the eyes of someone who'd had softness torn out of her. One morning, Elias found her outside, brushing frost off the root cellar door. She looked up and said, "Storm's shifting. Snow melt in a week. That creek will rise fast. You been watching it?" She nodded. Always watch the water. Water carries more than rain. That same day, Elias caught Ruthie digging a shallow trench behind the chicken coop. Not for play. The hole was narrow, angled, lined with pine needles. "Why?" he asked. She didn't stop digging. In case we need to hide. He didn't ask from what. He already knew. That evening, he rode into Red Butte to trade pelts. The general store was quieter than usual. Fewer eyes met his. A man outside the saloon muttered something about squatters in the hills. Another said the word half-breeds under his breath like it was poison. Elias didn't stop walking, but his jaw locked tight. At the counter, the shopkeep weighed the pelts and said flatly, "You taking charity cases now, Rourke?" Elias didn't answer, just waited for his coins. "She's trouble, that one. Heard she was seen in San Mateo 5 years back. Husband got strung up for mixing blood. Comanche, they said." Elias met the man's eye. "You got anything else worth hearing?" The shopkeep swallowed. "No, sir." When Elias returned, night had settled heavy over the mountains. The fire crackled low. Maylene sat in the chair by the hearth, mending Samuel's shirt. She looked up, not surprised to see him early. "They're looking for you," Elias said, laying his rifle near the door. "Or him." She nodded, threading her needle with calm fingers. "They always are." "You running from the law?" "I'm running from men who use the law like a mask," she said. "There's a difference." He sat down slow, the chair creaking under his weight. "They say your husband was Comanche." Maylene paused, the needle frozen in her grip. "He was," she said, "a healer, not a warrior. He taught me plants, roots, how to track storms by the way animals move. He didn't carry a gun." "What happened?" She pulled the thread through the cloth. "They said he stole land that wasn't his. But the land was his grandfather's. His blood had soaked that dirt long before theirs had. Didn't matter. Paper said white. He wasn't white. And the children? They saw everything," she said, her voice hardening. "And they'll never forget it." Elias stared into the fire, the flames dancing behind the grate like restless ghosts. He remembered a village in Tennessee, burning. A woman scream. A boy hiding in the rafters of a barn that collapsed in flame. Orders were orders, and still he hadn't slept right since. "They'll come here, won't they?" he asked. Maylene didn't look up. "Yes." "Will you fight?" She tied the thread, bit the end. "I've done what I had to. I'll do it again." Outside, the wind groaned against the doorframe. The dog growled low, staring out through a crack in the shutters. Ruthie came in from the cold, snow dusting her shoulders. She carried a rabbit and a quiet expression, her blade still tucked into her boot. Elias watched her walk past and realized something had shifted without him noticing. They weren't guests anymore. Later that night, unable to sleep, he stepped outside with his pipe. The snow had thinned. Stars blinked above like ice caught in black wool. He walked toward the trees. They creaked like old men in the dark. Near the ridge, he found tracks. Hooves. 4 of them. Fresh. Newer than they should be. The prints weren't from town folk. They rode light and wide, not for trade, but for hunting. When he returned to the cabin, Maylene was waiting in the doorway. "You saw them?" she asked. He nodded. "They've found us." Elias looked at the children sleeping by the fire, and something deep in him stirred, a feeling he hadn't named in years. Not quite fear, not quite rage. Something older. Resolve. "They're not going to take you," he said. Maylene stared at him for a moment, then nodded once. Elias walked to the rack and took down his old rifle, the one with the chipped stock, the one he swore he'd never raise again. But some oaths are meant to be broken, especially when a family is at stake, even one you never expected to have. Snow began to melt into rivers of mud, pooling beneath the trees, soaking deep into the roots. The wind turned wet and heavy, and the land smelled of thaw, earth and rot, birthing something restless. Elias felt in his bones. Change coming fast. He cleaned his traps slower than usual, eyes drifting to the ridgeline more often than not. He'd lived through ambushes before. He knew the feel of waiting eyes, the breath behind the trees. Something was out there, circling. He didn't say it aloud. Didn't need to. Maylene felt it too. She moved differently now, lighter on her feet, hand closer to the stove's fire iron, jaw set like stone. They had fallen into a rhythm, These days, Luke fed the chickens without being asked. Ruthie patrolled the perimeter of the cabin each morning like a soldier. Samuel hobbled around with a stick he pretended was a sword, dragging it in the mud behind him. Elias found himself teaching, without meaning to, how to snare a squirrel, how to find north when the sky was cloudy, how to read the flick of a bird's wings before it flew. Ruthie listened the closest, eyes sharp, nodding once and committing it all to memory. Still, the quiet didn't hold. It broke the day 4 men rode into the valley, coats heavy with dust, faces hidden beneath broad hats. Elias saw them from the tree lean before they reached the house. He didn't move, just watched as they dismounted near the creek, slow and easy, like they weren't in a hurry. But there was no mistaking what they were. One of them wore a badge, old, tarnished, but still visible. A tin excuse. Another had a rifle slung too loose across his back, like he wanted someone to notice. They didn't knock, just waited. Elias stepped from the trees, rifle cradled in the crook of his arm. His voice came out flat. "You boys lost." The one with the badge, tall, clean-shaven, with a scar down his chin, tilted his head. "Heard tell there's a woman hiding out up here. 3 children. Folks in town said you might have taken them in." "Lot of folks talk more than they should," Elias said. The man smiled without warmth. "State's got papers. Says she's wanted for crossing territory lines with minors. Theft of property." He spat. "Children, that is. They ain't property. Law says otherwise." Elias' grip tightened. "You came up here for paper? Or blood?" A third man stepped forward then, younger, jumpier. His fingers twitched near his gun. "You planning on stopping us, old man?" "No," Elias said, lowering the rifle slightly. "I'm planning on outliving you." That was enough. The men took the hint. For now, they left without another word, but their silence said plenty. They'd be back, and next time they wouldn't ask. Back at the cabin, Maylene waited by the door. She'd watched it all through a crack in the shutters. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Not long," Elias answered. That night, they made preparations. Elias dug up the trap lines closest to the house, reset them deeper, deadlier. Ruthie took charge of the escape routes, mapping the fastest way to the creek, then to the old cave just past the bluff. Maylene boiled herbs and soaked cloth, preparing for wounds not yet taken. The dog wouldn't leave Samuel's side, like it sensed the storm too. As the fire cracked low, Elias sat sharpening his knife. Ruthie approached quietly. "You ever killed a man?" she asked. He looked up. "Too many. Did it change you?" "No," he said. "It showed me what I already was." She considered that, then pulled a small bundle from her coat. Inside was a carving. The little wolf she left at the barn, smooth now, details clearer. "I carved another," she said, placing it on the table. This one was of a bear, thick-necked, scar-eyed. She looked at him. "That one's you." He picked it up gently. "Don't look that mean." Ruthie smiled, small and short-lived. Then she returned to the shadows. Later, when Maylene sat alone by the fire, Elias joined her. Neither spoke for a time. "Those men, they won't stop," she said. "They don't want justice. They want what we remind them of." "I know," Elias said. "I can still run. Take the children. Leave you out of it." "No, you don't owe us anything." "I don't," he agreed. "But I've buried too many good people alone. I don't aim to add 4 more. She looked at him then, eyes shining in the firelight. "Why are you doing this?" He hesitated, thought of his brother's grave in the pines, the boy hiding in the barn fire, the woman who bled out under a white flag. "Because if I don't, I won't recognize what's left of myself." Outside, thunder rolled low in the distance. The land was speaking again, warning them. In the stillness that followed, Maylene reached out and placed her hand over his. "You're not alone anymore," she said. And Elias, for once, believed it. At dawn, smoke rose on the horizon. For riders again, only now they weren't asking questions. They were coming to take what didn't belong to them. And Elias Rourke would be waiting. The first shot cracked through the morning like a bone breaking underfoot. Sudden, sharp, too close. Elias dropped to his knees beside the chicken coop, dirt biting his skin, breath tight in his chest. From the trees, a second shot rang out. The hunters had returned, but they weren't hunting deer. Smoke unfurled from the barn roof, orange bloom rising behind it. Fire. They'd set it to flush them out, force their hand. The flames licked up like they knew what they wanted. Elias sprinted low toward the cabin, rifle across his back, eyes scanning the tree line. Bullets ripped through the air behind him. Bark splintered. Snow kicked up. The dog was already barking somewhere close, and inside the cabin he knew Maylene would be holding the front. Ruthie would have the rifle. The boys would be hidden in the cellar beneath the kitchen floor, beneath earth and dry roots, beneath a door covered with sacks of grain. They'd practiced it. Once. But once was enough when fear was fuel. He threw himself against the wall beside the door just as it opened. Ruthie pulled him in, rifle steady in her arms, cheeks streaked with soot. Maylene stood behind her, revolver gripped with both hands. Her eyes found Elias, and she didn't ask if he was hit. She could see he wasn't. "They're flanking," he said. "Two on the west ridge," one stayed back. "There were four," Ruthie said, voice tight. "Where's the last?" The answer came in the form of wood shattering. A crash at the rear. Elias spun just as the back door burst open, and a man with wild eyes stepped in, shotgun raised. Before he could fire, Ruthie did. One clean shot, straight to the chest. The man dropped like a sack of wet stone. She didn't tremble, just turned to reload. Maylene stared at the body for a beat too long, then looked at Elias. "We can't hold here." "No," he said. "You take the boys. Through the root cellar, past the creek. I'll cover. I'm not leaving you. I'm not asking." She opened her mouth to argue, but then Luke's scream echoed from below. Smoke was already leaking through the floorboards. "Go!" Elias growled, grabbing the extra rifle. "Take the side route. If I'm not there by dusk, you don't wait." Maylene hesitated, then nodded once. Her hand found his shoulder, tight, quick, and then she turned, vanished down the hidden stair, Ruthie close behind. Elias stepped outside into firelight and bullets. He moved like he'd moved in the war, low, fast, without hesitation. One man rose from behind a log and took aim. Elias shot first. The man dropped, hat spinning into the mud. A shot rang from the ridge, grazed Elias's arm, tearing cloth and skin. He didn't stop. Blood warmed his sleeve, hot against cold air. Another figure burst from the trees. This one wore the tin badge. Klein. They met at the edge of the fire, rifles abandoned. It became fists and knees, bone against bone. Klein slammed Elias into the wall of the burning barn. Smoke choked them both. "She ain't yours." Klein snarled, fists bloodied. "Them kids don't belong to you." "They don't have to." Elias gasped, spitting blood. "I chose them." Klein raised a knife. Too slow. Elias caught his wrist, drove his forehead into the man's nose, felt the cartilage give. Klein staggered. Elias took the knife and plunged it into his thigh. The man howled, dropped. Elias stepped back, breathing heavy, ash falling like snow. The barn creaked, then roared. The roof collapsed inward, sparks leaping skyward. Only one hunter remained. Elias knew, the one who'd stayed behind, the one who would follow the children. He didn't pause, just ran. The trail to the creek was thick with brush and clawing branches. Blood smeared bark where Maylene had passed. He followed it like scripture, breath ragged, legs burning. At the bend, he found him, last of the bounty men, blocking the path, gun aimed low. The man turned, smirking when he saw Elias. "Didn't think you'd follow," he said. "Thought you'd stay and die with the house." "Not today," Elias said, and raised his rifle. The man fired first, grazed Elias's ribs, sent him stumbling. But Elias didn't drop. He fired once, center mass. The man buckled, fell to his knees, mouth working wordlessly before he collapsed into wet leaves. The woods went quiet, just the wind now, and the sound of Elias's own heart thudding like a war drum. He kept moving. By the time he reached the cave, the sun had dipped below the ridge. Maylene stood outside, revolver in one hand, Ruthie beside her. Samuel peeked out from behind, face streaked with smoke but unbroken. Elias staggered to a stop. Maylene stepped forward, took his arm. "You're hurt." "Later," he said. "They're gone." "You're sure?" He nodded. "Counted bodies myself." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Inside, they built a small fire from damp branches. Luke fetched water. Ruthie stitched Elias's wound. Maylene sat beside him, silent, eyes studying every movement, every wince. She didn't cry. Neither did he. Later, Samuel curled against Elias's leg, breathing slow, safe. The boy looked up sleepy-eyed and asked, "Pa?" The word hung in the cave, soft and weightless, until Elias felt its weight land. He looked at Maylene. She didn't speak, just watched. Elias pulled the boy close. "Yeah," he said softly. "I reckon I am." Outside, the land exhaled. The fire cracked and held, and the dark no longer felt so wide.